farms, the orchards. Without me, humans could not exist. But you treat me like dirt. Do you realize that I am just a thin skin on this planet? And that I'm actually alive, full of organisms that grow your food? But I am broken, aching, overused, sick because of you. You have withered me away to less than half of what I used to be just over 100 years ago. Are you paying attention? I am turning to dust. So maybe you could treat me with a little more respect. I suppose you still want to eat, right?
Good morning. Tina, I was worried we'd be alone here this morning.
Yes, 8:30 is a little bit early, right? And the weather is quite nice. But I'm quite impressed, and that must say something about how good the speakers and the groups were yesterday.
And also that a bridge, of course, starts somewhere. That was yesterday. And then somewhere else. That's today.
Very clever.
And also that we didn't really, at least we Swedes, we didn't have really a good reason to stay out late and celebrate yesterday.
No, I thought we weren't going to talk about that.
Yeah, we're not. But since we're not going to talk about it, let's just say that we know now that we need to focus on something else rather than just sports. And that's what the bridge is about.
Exactly. You have to be well best at something, and then we got one thing we could tick off. Sorry. So now we will focus on the other ones.
And it goes with Danes as well, so don't be like that.
We're not even in, right? So.
So today, we are going to focus first on raw materials, and then we're going to focus on sustainable energy. But yesterday, what are your main takeaways from yesterday, Tina?
Well, I've been trying to think about what can we take away, because there's so much, right? And it's, you get inspired and you get moved, but you kind of want to be able to turn it into something concrete, something specific. And one of the very specific things that I took away was Brent's charts of how the different food types really impact the environment. And I knew that beef was bad, but I was blown away with how bad it was, and actually how comparatively good chicken is. So I thought that you had to switch from big juicy steak to pot of salad, and I thought that was a bit tough. But if you can switch from juicy steak to chicken, then maybe that's a good middle step for me, I think.
Or to the burger we had yesterday. I just love that burger. It was just great. Another takeaway that I have, well, and you corrected me on that one because I thought it was 81% that had already exchanged business cards and started doing business, but you said it was 83%, but at least it proves that we are already making something happen after and beyond and thanks to the bridge.
Yes. Yeah, very exciting. So I think we are very excited to get started with day 2. Should we just get started?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, let's do that. Are you ready?
Let's go for it. What's going to happen?
What's going to happen? So we're going to start out with something amazing, yeah? So not to put pressure on the next speaker, but it's going to be really, really a great start to the day. So I would like to introduce a very special woman. There's a big place in my heart for women who go out and achieve stuff in environments where it's tough, where perhaps it's not expected of them, and where there are many obstacles in their way. And what we're going to see now is someone who's done all of that and so much more. So in a second, I'm going to introduce Achenyo Idachaba to come up to the stage. She is a computer scientist that has turned social entrepreneur because she could see that that was what was necessary. And she's put all her energy and all her focus into not only promoting but ensuring sustainability in her native Nigeria. And she's doing that through business. So if that isn't the perfect opener for the bridge and everything we're here to promote, then I don't know what is. So please welcome Achenyo to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank the initiators and the conveners of the Bridge Summit for giving me this very unique opportunity to participate in this program, in this summit. I have been given the monumental task of talking about raw materials. And as if that wasn't monumental enough, I've been given the added responsibility of answering the question, are we running out? Answering the question is quite complicated because of the different scenarios that are involved. So if you talk about cultivation, you talk about issues of climate and climate change, which might have a positive or negative effect. If you talk about production, you talk about advancements in technology, research and innovation. If you talk about consumption, you're looking at demand, growing in some areas and waning in others. And as if that wasn't complicated enough, you talk about the sheer number of raw materials that are out there. About 2 weeks ago, I had the unique opportunity of participating in the materials farm at the Matafad, which is in Barcelona. And myself, as well as 8 other designers, were there to talk about new materials that we're working with in our various spheres. Now, the Matafad is also home to the Material Center of Barcelona. And this Material Center has over 3,500 raw materials cataloged. So you have your biomaterials, you have your fibers, you have your polymers, you have paper, you have leather, etc. And this is just one repository in Europe. And then let's bring it closer to home here in Sweden. I had the unique opportunity of being at the inauguration of Max 4. And for me, that was just mind-blowing. I did not know anything about synchrotron radiation until a few days ago, but it was very fascinating. And as I participated in that program, I thought of the plethora of opportunities that will open up as a result of Max 4 in the area of new materials. So I say all this to say that I have a very daunting task in front of me, and I will attempt, and I stress the word attempt, to tackle this question by rendering an apologetic. And it'll be based on my personal experiences in the business and my interaction with raw materials over the past 15 years. I'll also provide examples which I hope are practical and relatable at the end of the day. So I promise not to turn this into a supply chain management 101 course, but we are going to start with the basics. The what, the why. So what exactly are raw materials? You can say basically raw materials come in 3 forms: in the natural state, in the modified state, or in the semi-processed state. So you look at materials and substances. And whichever form they come in, they're actually input into a production process that results in the manufacture of finished goods. So we use raw materials in very highly technical manufacturing processes, and we also use raw materials in low-tech and manual processes. We use raw materials in developed countries and economies, and we also use raw materials in developing countries and economies. So whichever way you look at it, raw materials are very foundational in every sense. So we move to another basic definition of, how are raw materials made and where do they come from? So generally speaking, I'll say that there are, and we need to advance this, there are 3 ways we come about raw materials. We can cultivate them or rear them, and that's specifically our agricultural materials. So you have your grains, you have cotton, you have livestock. We can also exploit or extract or explore materials. And these are typically our natural resources, your crude oil, coal, copper, iron ore. And then we can also engineer materials. So, and you come up with your polymers and your composites, which could either be in liquid or solid form. Some raw materials are peculiar to certain locations. Some locations have been blessed with very favorable soil and climate to grow them. Some locations have also been blessed with raw materials, natural resources. For example, the oil-producing countries. You have coal, you have copper, and you have iron ore. And as I understand it, iron ore is also mined here in Sweden, in Kiruna, if I'm not mistaken. Prior to becoming a social entrepreneur, back in 2009, it was actually late 2009, I had a corporate career in the energy industry. I actually worked for ExxonMobil. And I worked there for over a decade before I relocated back to Nigeria to become a social entrepreneur and do things in the environmental sphere. Now, at some point during my career at ExxonMobil, I was responsible for sourcing raw materials, specifically additives and base oils. And I had a lot of interesting conversations with our suppliers. And as Tina mentioned, I'm not a chemist, neither am I a chemical engineer, I'm actually a computer scientist. But it was a very enlightening period of my life because we spoke about, viscosity index improvers, pour point depressants, anti-wear agents, antioxidants, rust inhibitors, you name it. And our conversations revolved around, additive breakthroughs as well as availability of raw materials for manufacturing. Now I'm going to take some practical examples from my personal interactions, and I'm going to start with lithium hydroxide. This was one of the additives in my sourcing portfolio while I was at ExxonMobil. Now, lithium hydroxide is made from lithium, which is the third element in the periodic table. There are three main producers of lithium hydroxide, three countries: Australia, Chile, and China. And of the three, Chile has the largest confirmed reserves in the world at 7.5 million tons. And you can find these lithium salt mines in a place called Atacama. Now, lithium hydroxide in the laboratory, and the chemists will be able to better speak to this, comes about when you combine lithium and water. So you end up with your lithium hydroxide. And lithium hydroxide is part of lithium stearate, which is used in manufacturing lubricant greases. So we have this white hygroscopic crystalline material, which is right up there, which is one part of the lithium stearate. On the other hand, we have this organic compound, we have the seeds there, which are castor beans. And castor beans are used to make, or you derive castor oil from castor beans. There are two countries in the world that are known for cultivating castor beans: India and Brazil. And castor oil is a very critical component of this lithium stearate. Now, the interesting thing about castor beans is that it's a very sensitive crop. The rains can't come too early, the rains can't be too much. You can only have your climate at your temperature at 100 degrees Fahrenheit for a certain number of days, otherwise your crop would not set. So a very, very sensitive crop. Now, As I mentioned, this forms the second part, the real castor oil forms the second part of the lithium stearate, which is used in conjunction with other additives to come up with lubricant greases which are used in industrial applications. And the illustration up here shows some bearings which have been lubricated with greases. Now, the very important thing about these raw materials is that they always have to be on spec. And for those of you that have been involved in manufacturing greases, you know, the folks in the lube oil blend plants will say it's an art, not a science, because it is just very, very sensitive to make. So the products or the raw materials must always be on spec, and of course for them to be on spec, there have to be favorable conditions associated with either the production or the cultivation of the raw material. So bottom line, shortages or outages, maybe due to a bad harvest, could have a corresponding effect on the availability of greases for industrial use. And you know that industry or the industrial sector is a very vibrant part of most of our economies. And so the conversations with suppliers, again, always revolved around, do you have enough stock to cover our offtake agreements? And for we the buyers, or myself the buyer at that time, did we have enough stock to cover production? And how to consistently review our business contingency plans to ensure that we could mitigate supply disruptions should they occur. The next slide is actually more current. It's more relevant to what I am doing today. In 2013, MITI-MEF, and that's the name of my social enterprise, received the Local Raw Materials Content Award. And the award was given to us by the Raw Materials Research and Development Council in Nigeria. And it was given to us for our innovative use of water hyacinth. Now, Nigeria has an abundant supply of water hyacinth, which is an invasive aquatic weed. And as you can see in this picture, essentially an environmental menace. I mean, you have this in the waterways, you know, access to it is severely curtailed. Those who depend on the waterways for their livelihoods are essentially hindered. So we have water hyacinth, which actually invaded the waterways in 1984. So it's been over 3 decades now. But interestingly, it's not a problem that's peculiar to Nigeria alone. In 2013, UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Program, actually published a report indicating that there are 50 countries across the globe, and this is, you know, in tropical and subtropical zones that have been negatively impacted by the infestation of water hyacinth. At MITI-MEF, we have taken this highly cellulosic and durable fiber and decided, well, we're going to create lifestyle products from it. So we harvest the water hyacinth from the waterways. We then transform it, we dry it. And then we now transform the water hyacinth into ropes, which you see in the upper right-hand corner. And from there, we take it to the next level and we develop lifestyle products. And this is just one example of some of the products that we make. We have, up in this picture here, placemats and coasters. But are there scenarios that could possibly lead to a shortage of water hyacinth? Is it possible that some form of biological control could be unleashed in the waterways, which would completely eradicate water hyacinth? It's possible, but unlikely. Now, is there a possibility that somebody in government in Nigeria could wake up one day and declare that, from now henceforth, it is illegal to harvest water hyacinth from the waterways? It sounds absurd, but it's likely. So what we need to do is actually, possibly look at alternate methods or alternative materials that we could use in the situation that this actually happens. So are we running out of materials? Are we running out of lithium? Are we running out of castor beans? Are we running out of crude? Are we running out of copper? Are we running out of iron ore? Now the question goes beyond that, or maybe we should, bring it down to another level and specifically ask, are we running out of these raw materials domestically or globally? And in situations where we have actually run out of the raw materials, what has been the root cause of the shortage? Now, these questions inevitably lead us to finding answers that would help us prevent or mitigate shortages or scarcity of these raw materials. So what I'm going to do, the next few slides, is talk about some methods that we use to prevent or mitigate supply disruptions. And the first one I'm going to talk about are raw material reserves, strategic reserves. And I say, strategic reserves are also known as stockpiling, and they're also known as hoarding. So you have governments and organizations across the globe who tend to maintain raw material strategic reserves for raw materials that would actually leave them in vulnerable positions if there happens to be a supply disruption. So if we look at the picture in the upper left-hand corner, those are strategic petroleum reserves in the US. And they're located along the Gulf of Mexico, the coastline of Texas and Louisiana. And there are about 4 of them. They're located deep within some salt caverns along the coastline. And these strategic petroleum reserves actually have the capacity of 727 million barrels. The US came to implement or maintain these strategic reserves post the oil embargo in 1973-74. And I can say that in recent times, they have had to draw down on the strategic reserves, specifically in the year 2005. How many of you can remember Hurricane Katrina? Yes, it was very devastating. I was still with ExxonMobil at that time, and I can tell you it was a very difficult time. The US actually had to draw down on their strategic reserves during Hurricane Katrina because of oil supply disruptions that occurred during that time. In China, there's a state bureau for strategic reserves, and they also maintain reserves of, copper, and you can see in the picture here, one of the copper mines, iron, as well as rare earth minerals. Believe it or not, at Metimet, we stockpile. And the reason why we stockpile water hyacinth, not in its fresh form, in the dried form, is because water hyacinth tends to be seasonal. So you don't get it year-round. So in order for us to mitigate or prevent situations whereby we'll not be able to produce, we actually stockpile during the high infestation season. Okay, the next mitigating method that I'm going to talk about has to do with financial markets. So up on this slide, we see commodities. And I'm going to use commodities and raw materials interchangeably as I talk about financial markets. And we have commodities that are bought and sold on various commodity exchanges across the world, primarily in agriculture, but trades also occur in the energy sector, as well as in metals, both ferrous and non-ferrous. Let me not say unfortunately, but water hyacinth at this point in time is yet to be traded on the commodities exchange. So we have to look to other methods apart from the financial markets in order to address any supply issues that we might encounter during the course of the year. But I mean, when we talk about commodity exchanges, the reason why they came about was to actually address supply, year-round supply issues. Companies wanted to guarantee that they had enough raw materials to cover their production processes or their consumption within those organizations during the year. So we have major commodities, on over 90, we have over 90 commodity exchanges across the world. And I just highlighted a few of those up here. But basically, these commodity exchanges traded maize, cotton, soybeans, cocoa, pork bellies, and I have to ask you, does anyone know what pork bellies are? It's funny because the first time I heard about pork bellies was actually watching the movie Trading Places, and I couldn't for the life of me fathom why pork bellies were being traded on the commodities exchange. But interestingly, how many of you like bacon? I mean, I have had some very good bacon at the hotel almost every morning. And apparently pork bellies are a very vital component for making bacon. And so back in 1961, when pork bellies started being traded on the commodities exchange in Chicago, it essentially allowed meat packers to hedge against the volatile pig market. So, the commodities exchange, basically you have various commodities and, futures contracts out there with people buying and selling to guarantee that they have supply of raw materials when they need them. The next topic in regards to supply of raw materials and guaranteeing them has to do with research and development. So in agriculture, you have various institutions such as the Food and Agriculture Organization, you have the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, whose mandate is to ensure food security and poverty alleviation. And you'll find that, a number of these institutions have been working on, coming up with seed varieties that are actually climate resistant. Because with the issues of climate change, weather patterns become very unpredictable. And if you have crops that are very sensitive to temperature and sensitive to climate, the standard seeds that we have used in the past would not guarantee that farmers would end up having very good harvests or very good crop yields. So these institutions are actually tasked to come up with seeds that are climate resistant and are able to thrive in very uncertain weather patterns. Now, when oil was first discovered, I'm sure the first explorers or exploiters probably thought it was only going to be available for a very finite period of time. And they were probably right, given the technology that existed back then. But we've come a very long way, and we find that exploration is taking place in very remote locations, both onshore and offshore. Research and development efforts have also led to the discovery of substitutes, which have also led to unintended shortages in other areas. So you call that a catch-22 situation. And I'll give the example of a particular substitute that was discovered during World War II by the US. And the name of this material is butadiene, which is essentially a rubber substitute. And how this discovery came about was when, supplies from Asia were cut off during World War II. So that essentially forced the US to look for alternates, and they found it in butadiene. Now, butadiene is, a byproduct that comes from making plastics, and plastics from petroleum-based naphtha. Well, as it happens today, suppliers or manufacturers of plastics are switching to the lower priced feedstock. So looking at things like ethane, which is a natural gas liquid. Well, the problem with this lower cost feedstock is that it produces little to none butadiene as a byproduct. So that, in essence, has stimulated the need to research on the lower cost feedstocks. And you have companies like Honeywell partnering with TPC Group, and BASF also partnering with Linde AG to develop technology that will produce butadiene from butane, which is another natural gas liquid. Now, my final example in the area of research and development has to do with water hyacinth. So if there, for any reason, happens to be, a permanent shortage of water hyacinth in Nigeria, I need to have a business contingency plan. I need to look for alternates and raw materials, and it doesn't start when the shortage occurs. It starts now that I have the raw material in abundance. I could, always source semi-processed water hyacinth from, the other 49 countries that also have this problem. Or I could take things a step further by looking at other natural fibers that have similar characteristics or properties to water hyacinth. And I've actually found that in a vast amount of agricultural waste. Nigeria, apart from it being an oil-based economy, we're also agrarian, although the agricultural part does not necessarily contribute significantly to our GDP. So I've found that there are other natural fibers out there that can be exploited. So I could look at maize, I could look at banana, I can look at palm, as well as coconut, to see how we can create new materials in terms of sustainable textiles, particle board, installation material for the building and construction industry, and looking at fiber reinforced composites and the like. So not just lifestyle products, but actually taking this to a new level as a result of efforts in research and development. Now, as I think back to my sourcing days for raw materials at ExxonMobil and my current role as a producer and manufacturer, I'm quite comfortable stating that most producing entities, be they big or small, have in various ways adopted the alternative principle in one form or the other, especially if the entity or the organization depends on externally sourced raw materials. So next I'll talk about technology and innovation, and it sort of, flows back and forth between R&D. They were all, within the same big family. So let's look at the EU. I was able to get this from the website, from one of the websites. So in the lower left-hand corner, you have 20 materials which are actually on EU's critical raw materials list. And the interesting thing about these 20 materials is that most of them are sourced from outside the EU. Now, one of the primary reasons, I read through the different reasons as to why this critical raw materials list was developed, was to actually prioritize actions and also promote research and innovation. So I can guarantee, although I'm not willing to bet my bottom dollar on this, but I can almost guarantee that because of this reason to actually promote research and innovation, I'm sure in the years ahead, even currently, you'll find out that technological advances and innovation have resulted in perhaps some of these raw materials being available from closer sources than where they're currently located now. Now, technological advances will also lead to exploration, cultivation, and production of raw materials in new locations and from new sources. So if you look at the diagram in the upper right-hand corner, again, this is related to the oil industry, we have a picture of hydraulic fracturing. And I know, fracking is the other name by which it's known. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding fracking in terms of, the potential of it contaminating underground water and so on and so forth. But needless to say, it is a technology that is out there and a process that is out here to stay. And we have seen the effects of, oil from shale coming online with the price of crude oil tanking very, very seriously. So we have processes that essentially ensure that we get more from less. And then I'd also like to talk about synchrotron radiation and possibly Max 4. As I sat through the presentations, listening to, the potentials and what it could be used for, I couldn't help but, sort of reflect on my days as a sourcing specialist back at ExxonMobil, where we were looking at, what the alternatives could be, and specifically castor oil. I often thought to myself, okay, we're dealing with a very critical component here that, if India and Brazil happen to have a very bad harvest that year, we're finished. We won't have any greases to make because the raw material that we need is lacking. Now, castor bean is not the only oil seed out there. There's several other oil seeds that are out there that could be potential candidates. One of the questions, one of the discussions that I used to have rather frequently with the suppliers is, why aren't we using other oil seeds? Why aren't we exploring the use of other oil seeds for, the oil that we need for this soap? And, there were all kinds of reasons, in terms of stability and what have you. But I'm thinking, okay, well, I think this is a potential opportunity, I don't know, for lubricant manufacturers to actually use, synchrotron radiation or the technology here to understand the properties of the various oil seeds that are out there. And, several others have come online since my days of sourcing and looking at how these oil seeds can actually be potential and viable substitutes for making greases in lubricant greases in the energy industry. Now, lastly, I'll talk about possible innovations or possible innovative uses of water hyacinth, which is more near and dear to me at this point in time, and other natural fibers with similar properties. So other innovative uses of water hyacinth are in the area of biofuels and biogas. It's a plant that's very rich in methane, and of course methane can be converted to fuel. You can also look at phytoremediation, and it has been used in certain parts of the oil-producing region to actually, it absorbs pollutants very, very well. So it is a very good candidate for phytoremediation. And then also livestock feed, which is being done in parts of Southeast Asia at the moment, as well as organic compost. All of these are quick hits as well as solutions to major problems that are being faced by communities that are impacted the most by the infestation of water hyacinth. Now, to round this all up, this is getting close to my last slide here, I would like to say in summary that, continuous research and development, technology, innovation, effective financial markets, as well as sustainable practices would actually ensure that we do not run out of raw materials anytime soon. Technological advancements would also continue to confound those who fear that there are limitations on the availability of raw materials. However, as we grow, as we exploit, as we explore, as we cultivate, as we engineer, as we produce, let us do all of this with thoughts of tomorrow. And with that, I would like to end with a quote by Bernard Awuta, who's the regional director for the World Fair Trade Organization, Africa. And we're having a conversation, and he said this, which, I mean, it had a very profound impact and gave me good food for thought, and I hope it gives you food for thought as well. That materials are not necessarily in short supply. The problem is how we exploit them and how we use them. So the charge to us as producers, as well as consumers of raw materials in various forms, is to exploit and use our raw materials in environmentally sustainable ways and in also a morally responsible manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Achenyo. That was a lot of information from the early morning. You had coffee this morning, didn't you?
Actually, I haven't.
There is so much interesting stuff in this, but also so many things explored. So I think I'm going to give the audience an opportunity to ask you a couple of questions. But I would like to start. Tell me a little bit about your company.
Okay. All right, so I have a social enterprise called Mitimet, and what we're doing, actually we started off looking at water hyacinth, and folks say, you know, why water hyacinth? I actually, when I returned to Nigeria, my focus was on the environmental sphere, looking at waste recovery and utilization opportunities. So I was already in this mindset of, you know, looking for opportunities that we could explore within the environment.
But you didn't know it was going to be the water hyacinth
I
at
did
that
not.
point.
I did not. So I happened to be in Lagos and looked over the longest bridge and saw a picture similar to what I had displayed earlier. But that one was more grim because there were lots of fishing boats actually hemmed in by water hyacinth. And that essentially set the ball spinning. It's like, what can be done to take care of the environment? And what can be done to help the communities gain access to their waterways? And that is essentially the genesis of Mitimet. So what we do right now is we take the water hyacinth and transform the water hyacinth into home decor and personal accessories. But apart from that, we also provide training to communities to actually turn their adversity into prosperity. So providing them with skill sets that would enable them to come up with job opportunities to utilize this abundant raw material resource in their environment.
Yeah, and very importantly, engaging the community, right?
Exactly.
So they're a part of their own solution.
Precisely.
Yeah, very inspiring. Do we have a question from the audience? We have one here. We got a microphone coming to you.
Hi there, thank you very much. I'm from Social Entrepreneurship Forum, and I'm just interested to hear about your thoughts about the step you made from Exxon to running your own social enterprise, and what's the difference for you personally to work with your social enterprise compared to working at Exxon?
Okay, very good question. And I tell folks, you know, when I left ExxonMobil, a number of folks thought I was nuts, that I had lost my mind completely. Not only was I leaving ExxonMobil in the US, I was heading to Nigeria. I mean, it just confounded a number of people. But having said that, I mean, I left with a deep sense of conviction that there was a lot of opportunity and work to be done at the grassroots level in Nigeria, especially in the area of sustainable development. And what I did was essentially take the skills and the knowledge at ExxonMobil, and essentially I'm using that in the social enterprise today. Now, I'm not wearing suits, I'm not sitting in conference rooms, you know, having very structured meetings per se, but at the same time, the principles are still quite relevant in terms of running a business. So I'm working more with the grassroots level, helping them to understand how they also can, you know, come up with businesses based on resources that are in situ, and actually keeping people in situ as well. So, you know, we talk about youth unemployment, which is quite high in Nigeria. So instead of, you know, the youth running to the urban areas which are already overstretched, stay in the rural areas. There are ample opportunities for you to come up with livelihoods within your immediate environment. So I would say it's been a great transition. I have no regrets.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's also a question of civil commitment, right? You go from a well-paid job in the States, and then you go back home to your native country, which has a lot of challenges. I think all native countries do, no matter where we're from in the world. But it's also taking responsibility. Was that part of your decision-making?
Absolutely, taking responsibility, and also, in a way, feeling that, there was a bit of accountability as well. So you're going into these communities and you're helping them to see things through a different set of lenses, right? So they've been used to seeing this fiber as, something to despair about, and you're coming and you're telling them that actually, there are different ways of looking at this. This is actually an opportunity staring at you in the face, and not just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk, so that they can actually see that there's practical demonstration that this proof of concept can work. And I think for us at Mitimed, it has worked well in the sense that there's a product to show at the end of the day. I think if you were in services, it might be a tougher sell. But at the end of the day, you have a product that people have actually made, they can touch, they can feel, they can sell. So I think from our perspective and what we're involved in, it has been a much easier sell than if we were to do a service.
Wow, thank you very much. Very inspirational, right? Thank you very much, Achenyo. I can see that if I had more time, there would be more questions, but maybe you will stick around and give people an opportunity to come and say hi to you. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.